Let's bring in our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills. She's at the Royal Courts of Justice. Rhiannon, bring us more on this breaking news and the background to it, and I guess the level of surprise we have that this is not going to trial and has been settled.
It has to be said, this is absolutely extraordinary. We know that Prince Harry, as he said when he released his book Spare, he was making it his life's work to take on the mispractices of the tabloid press. This was going to be his day in court. This was going to be his opportunity to make news group newspapers, the publishers of The Sun and the News of the World, finally answer questions about the unlawful activities that he claimed were being carried out by reporters and private investigators in order to obtain stories about him and so many other people. But what has happened today is that news group newspapers have, in essence, given him the apology that he has wanted. This has never been about the money, as he has always said. Financially, he was always potentially set to lose out. They were offering him settlements clearly in the run-up to this trial. He was refusing them, but he knew that even if he won this case, even if he won damages, he could still potentially have lost out financially because he would have had to pay his own costs and those of the opposition. But today, as I say, news group newspapers have released what is this extraordinary apology. They offer a full and unequivocal apology to him for what they say was the serious intrusion by The Sun between 1996 and 2011 into his private life, including, they say, incidents of unlawful activities carried out by private investigators. They also go on to apologise for phone hacking, surveillance and misuse of private information by journalists and private investigators. What is also very striking is they apologise to the Duke for the impact on him of extensive coverage and serious intrusion into his private life, so not just focusing on specific articles he was due to bring up in this case, but also say intrusion into his private life as well as the private life of Diana, Princess of Wales, his late mother, in particular during his younger years. And of course, over the years, we have heard consistently about the impact that the media intrusion had on Prince Harry, the media intrusion that he said was carried out into his mother's life, and ultimately, he says, played a part in her death. So really striking that they mentioned Diana, Princess of Wales in there. They also talk about how they apologise for the distress caused to the Duke and the damage it inflicted on relationships, friendships and family over the years. And also here, when it comes down to the money, they say they have agreed to pay him substantial damages. Now, what also is really important to point out is throughout this trial, by bringing this to trial, what Prince Harry ultimately wanted to do is to make news group newspapers also acknowledge that there was some form of cover-up, that senior executives knew what was going on within the newsroom. They knew the illegal, unlawful activities that were being carried out by reporters. That is something that news group newspapers have never admitted to, and actually they still haven't. But what they have said is it's also acknowledged without any admission of illegality that news group newspapers' response to the 2006 arrests and subsequent actions were regrettable, which appears to allude to these suggestions that were going to come out through this trial about emails possibly being deleted and hard drives also being done away with as well. So yeah, this is absolutely extraordinary, the fact that the Duke of Sussex today has decided to settle. Also alongside him, it's worth pointing out, was a co-claimant, Lord Watson, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party. He also has received a full and unequivocal apology for the unwanted intrusion carried out into his private life during his time in government by the News of the World. So yeah, there are two apologies here, but of course, we have this huge focus. There's always been this huge focus on Prince Harry, who was talked about being one of the last people standing when it came to wanting to hold news group newspapers to account.
Rhiannon, we are waiting for the full statement to be read out, of course, by Prince Harry's lawyer, and we'll go to that when it begins. I just want to come back to one headline point in the statement that we've been given that will be read out shortly. And that says, that's an admission, if I read this correctly, that journalists at The Sun used unlawful activities. I don't think we've ever had that admitted before, have we?
That's huge. That is, and it is new, because you have to remember that since 2011, we had the potential for this to go to trial. Between 2011 and now, 1,300 individuals have settled out of court with News Group newspapers. I was talking to someone within Prince Harry's team earlier in the week who said that they believe the bill for that has been between $1 and $2 billion for News Group newspapers. It's been a huge amount of money. But with all of those settlements all along the line, News Group newspapers have never accepted any kind of illegality. And that is what is standing out with this statement, is they are apologising. And this is what Prince Harry has always wanted, and also Tom Watson has always wanted. They haven't just wanted the financial damages. They've wanted News Group newspapers to come out and make some kind of admission. This, for Prince Harry, has been a moral crusade. It's been a point of principle. And so yesterday, when we heard mutterings that they were potentially close to a settlement, it was surprising to hear. But it seems that overnight, yesterday afternoon, throughout the day, as the lawyers were saying to the judge, we need more time on this, they've now come together and they have got this apology that he so desperately wanted.
Yeah. And again, Rhiannon, just a further question on this. I mean, as we led up to this moment, whether it's the last 24 hours or the last year, we've heard many times Prince Harry profess that he's going to take this to the very end. He didn't want to settle, and that might, when you saw the headline cross that he settled, implied that he'd back down. I mean, again, you read the content of this apology to him and to Lord Watson, it doesn't really feel like that. It's hard for us to judge this, of course, whether he'll see this as victory, whether the world will see this as victory for him in the time to come. But this is a very striking statement that goes much further than perhaps many people would imagine.
I think without this apology, there is very little chance that Prince Harry was going to settle. But it's worth pointing out that this trial had huge reputational risks for News Group newspapers, for the senior executives that were potentially going to be named in allegations, which of course News Group newspapers denied. And that's why Prince Harry wanted to take this to trial. He wanted News Group newspapers finally in open court to have to talk about the unlawful activities of reporters at the News of the World and also at The Sun. And while at the News of the World back in 2011 there had been some level of apology to individuals who had had their phones hacked, certainly with The Sun newspaper there has never been any admission that unlawful activities were being carried out. It is worth pointing out that within this apology, it does say it is also acknowledged, but without any admission of illegality, that News Group newspapers' response to the 2006 arrests and subsequent actions were regrettable. So there are caveats within that apology. But also, in terms of what this means for Prince Harry, and just really to hammer home how significant this case was, look, we just have to look back over the last couple of years. When he released his book Spare, he talked about how this was no longer just a personal issue for him. This was now going to be his life's work in terms of holding the tabloid press to account. He wanted to do this not just for himself, but also for the thousands of individuals who he said didn't have the platform, didn't have the profile, didn't have the money to hold the papers to account. He also, back in December last year in New York, gave an interview where he alluded to this legal action that was coming up and said that the scale of the cover-up is so large that people need to see it for themselves. He was also sort of approached with, well, so many others have settled, why haven't you? And he said they've settled because they've had to settle. So therefore, one of the main reasons for seeing this through is accountability, because I'm the last person that can actually achieve that. So today, to see and hear that he has settled, that there has now been this very fulsome apology from News Group newspapers, I think we have to take a step back and realise just how extraordinary it is that he has taken a step back and said, yes, I accept that apology and I no longer want this to go to trial.
Let's also bring in now royal commentator Jenny Bond whilst we do wait for Prince Harry's barrister, Mr. Sherburn, to come out, David Sherburn, to come out and read that statement in full. Jenny, your assessment, who is this victory for? Which side?
I think it's a huge victory for Harry, actually, when you read that apology, albeit without an admission of illegality. It is extraordinary. And I think Harry is the person who has stood up in the royal family and said, no, I'm just not going to take it. I mean, I was reporting back in those years, back in the 90s, and it was extraordinary, the stories that were coming out day after day after day. And I, as the BBC's royal correspondent, was thinking, how is this happening? You know, am I the worst correspondent in the world? Why can't I get these stories? And then you find out the truth of it, that there was major intrusion by a number of tabloid newspapers. And the other extraordinary thing, I think, is that Harry will have witnessed, and I think it really rankled with him, that the palace was cozying up to those newspapers. I mean, quite clearly. I remember an occasion at Buckingham Palace, a big party, where I was told, as the BBC's royal correspondent, I had to stay outside, but I could go in for 15 minutes. Whereas inside, Piers Morgan, editor of the Mirror, David Yellen, editor of The Sun, were being wined and dined and partied. You know, it was not a level playing field.
What is your take on how close this got to going to trial? And do you think there was huge amounts of discussion in the last 24 hours about what would be included in this apology? I guess the amount of financial settlement too, albeit it doesn't sound like that's what Prince Harry or either side has been most concerned about.
No, but if we take Hugh Grant as the example, who did settle very reluctantly, he made it clear it was because if, having been offered a settlement, he turned that down and then was awarded 1 penny less than that proposed settlement, then he would be liable for huge costs on both sides. And I think that must have weighed into Harry's decision as well. But I was taken aback. I was surprised to hear that he'd settled because he wanted, I think, his day in court. But really, he's got the apology, and I don't know about the financial side of it, but he's got the apology he was seeking without his day in court, without those long 10 weeks of publicity. And it allows him to move forward with his life now, which I think is where he's going. You know, he's trying not always to look backwards.
Rhiannon, and we're waiting, obviously, for the statement to be read out. We're expecting that from who? From Prince Harry's lawyer, who's been by his side throughout this moment? Are we expecting a statement to come from Prince Harry as well in either the minutes ahead or the days ahead?
Yeah, so you might remember that it's David Sherburn, the barrister who's been representing Prince Harry, and also, you can't forget, Lord Tom Watson as well. He was the one who also went up to the wire in terms of wanting to take this to trial. So we are expecting David Sherburn to come out and read a statement. I think it's worth reflecting back on the fact that he was the one who read the statement for Prince Harry when he secured what was a substantial kind of victory in his case against Mirror News Group back in 2023. If we just reflect back on what Prince Harry said then, through his lawyer, he said, "I've been told that slaying dragons will get you burned. But in light of today's victory," this was his victory against the Mirror, "the importance of doing what's needed for a free and honest press, it's a worthwhile price to pay. The mission continues." This trial was going to be the next step of that mission. But I think Prince Harry over in the States, throughout these kind of what we're told were very intense negotiations over the last few days, will have been holding firm in terms of getting the apology that he wanted. It was extraordinary to hear in court how fulsome that apology was. If we go through kind of the main top lines again, News Group newspapers have offered a full and unequivocal apology to him for serious intrusion by the Sun between 1996 and 2011 into his private life, including incidents of unlawful activities carried out by private investigators working for the Sun. It was within this trial that the court was going to pick over 30 different articles that were written about Prince Harry. They've also apologised to him for phone hacking, surveillance and misuse of private information. That in itself is interesting because actually he wasn't being allowed to bring up elements of phone hacking within his case because Newsgroup newspapers had argued that he filed that out of time. He hadn't filed it within good time. But also I think what really stands out to me is that mention of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. There is no doubt that the impact of what happened to him, what happened to his mother, how he feels that she was hounded by the press, and subsequently he then was, despite the death of her, has had a huge impact on him and that moral position that he's continued to take when it comes to making sure that the British tabloid press learn from the mistakes that were made in the past. So within this apology, to see that it is written that Newsgroup newspapers further apologises to the Duke for the impact on him of the extensive coverage and serious intrusion into his private life, as well as the private life of Diana, Princess of Wales, in particular during his younger years, is it's quite incredible to read that Newsgroup newspapers have decided to go that far. They literally needed to focus on the articles between 1996 and 2011, but the scope of this apology is much broader than that, the most fulsome of apologies.
I want to bring in now Matthew Gill, a media lawyer. And Matthew, just to reread the first paragraph of this statement, Newsgroup newspapers offers a full and unequivocal apology to the Duke of Sussex for the serious intrusion by the Sun between 1996 and 2011 into his private life, including incidents of unlawful activities carried out by private investigators working for the Sun. Matthew, the history of this is kind of quite well known by most people, and most of the focus has always been on the news of the world, not the Sun. How significant is it to you to hear in this apology the admission that unlawful activities were carried out by private investigators working for the Sun?
You're absolutely right. It was expected, really, that the Sun would eventually concede, the Newsgroup newspapers would concede that News of the World had been involved in phone hacking and other unlawful methods of gathering news on Prince Harry and on Lord Tom Watson. But it is a much more surprising finding that Newsgroup have admitted today that the Sun were involved in unlawful gathering of information about Prince Harry and Lord Tom Watson. What's interesting, though, is that they don't admit. They continue to deny that the Sun had any involvement in phone hacking. That will have been a point that Prince Harry will have been keen for Newsgroup newspapers to admit, but that's not a point that he's been able to negotiate in this settlement. And it's clear that the Newsgroup newspapers and the Sun will continue to deny that there was any phone hacking that took place at the Sun.
Well, Jenny, Rhiannon and Matthew, stay with us. We're going to continue on this story, and we're expecting the statement from Prince Harry's barrister at 11:10 in 5 minutes' time. We'll be back on the story in just a moment, but we do just want to pivot and bring some other breaking news this morning. Kyle Clifford has pleaded guilty to the murders of a mother and her 2 daughters in their home in Bushey in July. Let's bring in Sky's Rachel Venables. She joins me outside Cambridge Crown Court. She was in the trial and the hearing. What's the latest, Rachel?
That's right. A number of charges. Kyle Clifford, who's 26 years old and from Enfield in North London, has now pleaded guilty to, including, most crucially, of course, the murders of 3 women, 2 young women in their 20s and their mum. That's Carol Hunt, who was 61 years old, and her daughters, Hannah, who was 28, and Louise, who were 25, all of them killed at the family home in Bushey last summer on the 9th of July. Kyle Clifford appeared in court here today via video link, and he changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder. He also admitted a few other charges, including the possession of an offensive weapon, that namely being a 10-inch knife, and he pleaded guilty to the possession of offensive weapon, namely a crossbow. The crossbow was used in the killing of the 2 daughters, while Carol Hunt, who was the wife of the racing commentator John Hunt, we heard, was stabbed to death. Now, he also faced a charge of false imprisonment. Again, he pleaded guilty to that today, but Kyle Clifford 26 years old, denied a final count, a seventh charge against him of rape. That is rape against Louise Hunt. He denied that charge. He pleaded not guilty, and he will go on trial later this year. That's booked currently in for the 3rd of March, again here at Cambridge Crown Court.
Rachel Venables, thanks so much for that. We're going to pivot back to the other breaking news story of the last hour, that Prince Harry has settled his case with News Group newspapers, the owner of The Sun. We're joined by Matthew Gill, a media lawyer, Jenny Bond, royal commentator, but also our royal editor, Rhiannon Mills. Rhiannon, first to you, remind us the headlines that we've learned in the last 20 minutes.
So, as a huge surprise to everyone, Prince Harry and Lord Watson, who was also his co-claimant, have decided to settle with News Group newspapers ahead of a trial which was due to begin yesterday. We were told by both legal teams yesterday they asked the judge for more time because they said that they were potentially close to a settlement. Negotiations were going right up to the wire. And then just after 10:30 this morning, as all of the legal parties gathered in court, an apology was read out by David Sherborne, who is the lawyer representing Prince Harry and Lord Watson, an apology on behalf of News Group newspapers. Now, it's worth reminding people that this was a trial that potentially has been in the offing since 2011, around the time that News Group newspapers admitted that there had been phone hacking at the News of the World. But since then, they have refused to admit in any way any unlawful activities going on at the Sun newspaper. Since then, 1,300 people have settled out of court with News Group newspapers. But there were two people still standing, Prince Harry and Lord Watson. For them, they have always made it clear that this was not about the money. This was not the finances. It was always going to be a huge risk. There was great jeopardy, enormous costs that were potentially facing them, either if they won or if they lost this case. What they wanted was an apology. They wanted an admission of liability, which all of those who've settled over the last decades have never received from News Group newspapers. There's never been any admission of liability. But today, that is what Prince Harry and Lord Watson have received from News Group newspapers. And it is a wide-ranging apology, apologising for unlawful activities that were carried out by private investigators working for The Sun. That previously has not been admitted. Apologising for phone hacking, surveillance and misuse of private information at the News of the World. Again, an apology that Prince Harry was holding out for, but also an apology for the intrusion into his private life as well as the private life of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales.
Jenny Bond, royal commentator, is with us. Jenny, remind us your conclusion in terms of who you see as the sort of victor of this drawn-out chapter, and whether there'll be any disappointment from Prince Harry that it didn't go to trial and lead to a sort of more sensational victory.
Well, I think it's pretty sensational anyway. As Rhiannon was saying, he's got this very full apology, not only on his own behalf, but I think what was so precious to him was to have an apology for his late mother, because he's spoken about her so much and how she was persecuted and murdered, and he has always held the press, the paparazzi, really responsible for her death. So I think a great vindication for him. I mean, I don't think he was fearful about appearing in court. He did very well when he took the stand a couple of years ago. He was really quite impressive. I think he was fully prepared to come over and see it out in public. But I think he has got the essentials of what he was after. He said he wanted to clean up the press, which, I thought the media, was a bit arrogant, really. However, I think he has proved that actually there were some seriously dirty tricks. They may or may not have been illegal. Certainly, NGN have not admitted illegality, but dirty tricks certainly went on all over the place, and he was a victim of it. And I think he will feel vindicated now.
Matthew Gill, media lawyer, we've seen in this statement that there were incidents of unlawful activities carried out by private investigators working for The Sun. Is that the end of it for The Sun, for the owner of The Sun, the publishers involved? Does it trigger further action? What's your interpretation?
I do think we are nearing the end of this. We are unlikely to see more claims. The Sun and News Group newspapers have already settled hundreds of claims, totaling over £1 billion. And so, we can expect that most of those settlement agreements will have been full and final, and that those who have already made claims won't be able to come back for a second bite of the cherry. Really, Prince Harry and Lord Tom Watson were the last two standing claimants, and even they have struggled with the delays that they the delays that they made in terms of bringing their claims had caused them issues and had caused them to stumble in this process. For example, Prince Harry wasn't allowed to bring a phone hacking claim because he delayed too long in bringing it. So he hasn't had success in establishing that there was, for example, phone hacking at The Sun. The admission that he's got from The Sun is one of unlawful news gathering activities such as deception or blagging information, not phone hacking. So it is becoming increasingly difficult for other celebrities to come forward because they have run out of time. They should have brought those claims earlier.
Rhiannon, remind us in terms of the comments that Prince Harry has made about this in the recent past. And, again, a snapshot of whether we expect specific statements from him in the hours and days ahead to sort of claim victory, if that's how he sees it.
I think we're about to get the statement now.
Let's listen to the statement. So this is David Sherburn, who is Prince Harry's barrister, and we are expecting him to read out the apology in full secured by News Group newspapers. It'd be interesting to see if there's anything further added to it from Prince Harry.
I've been asked to read out a statement on behalf of the Duke of Sussex and Lord Watson. In a monumental victory today, News UK have admitted that The Sun, the flagship title for Rupert Murdoch's UK media empire, has indeed engaged in illegal practices. This represents a vindication for the hundreds of other claimants who were strong-armed into settling without being able to get to the truth of what was done to them. After endless resistance, denials and legal battles by News Group newspapers, including spending more than £1 billion in payouts and in legal costs, as well as paying off those in the know in order to prevent the full picture from coming out, News UK is finally held to account for its illegal actions and its blatant disregard for the law. It has also specifically admitted wrongdoing against Tom Watson and admitted unlawful acts by The Sun, as well as by the News of the World against Prince Harry. The truth that has now been exposed is that News Group newspapers unlawfully engaged more than 100 private investigators over at least 16 years on more than 35,000 occasions. This happened as much at The Sun as it did at the News of the World, with the knowledge of all the editors and executives going to the very top of the company. What's even worse is that in the wake of the 2006 arrest of a royal correspondent, there was an extensive conspiracy to cover up what had really been going on and who knew about it. Senior executives deliberately obstructed justice by deleting over 30 million emails, destroying backup tapes, and making false denials, all in the face of an ongoing police investigation. They then repeatedly lied under oath to cover their tracks, both in court and at the Leveson public inquiry. At her trial in 2014, Rebecca Brooks said, "When I was editor of The Sun, we ran a clean ship." Now, 10 years later, when she is CEO of the company, they now admit when she was editor of The Sun, they ran a criminal enterprise. Far from being relics of a distant past, many of those behind these unlawful practices remain firmly entrenched in senior positions today, both within News UK and other media outlets across the world, wielding editorial power and perpetuating the toxic culture in which they continue to thrive. It's perhaps no surprise that all of their senior executives and editors refused to turn up to court to give evidence. The failure of each of these key individuals to come and answer questions under oath spoke volumes in itself, but their collective silence is deafening. Today's result has been achieved only through the sheer resilience of Prince Harry and Tom Watson, whose willingness to take News Group newspapers to trial has led directly to this historic admission of unlawfulness at the Sun. It has only been by taking News Group not just to the steps of court, but inside the courtroom itself, that these claimants have finally managed to extract this historic admission of guilt. As a direct result of him taking a stand, Prince Harry and his immediate family have also had to repeatedly withstand aggressive and vengeful coverage since starting his claim over 5 years ago. This has created serious concerns for the security of him and his family. The rule of law must now run its full course. Prince Harry and Tom Watson join others in calling for the police and Parliament to investigate not only the unlawful activity now finally admitted, but the perjury and cover-ups along the way. It is clear now that this has occurred throughout this process, including through sworn evidence in inquiries and court hearings, in testimony to Parliament, and until today's final collapse of News Group's defence. Today, the lies are laid bare. Today, the cover-ups are exposed, and today proves that no one stands above the law. The time for accountability has arrived. Thank you very much.
Mr Sherborne, Prince Harry said he wanted accountability. There's been no admission of liability by senior managers. Is this what he wanted?
Like every other person persecuted by News Group newspapers, I wish they had left my family alone. But what happened, happened. Today, I'm glad they have finally accepted responsibility. I'm glad they've apologised and acknowledged the direct harm caused by years of unlawful surveillance by their journalists and their army of private investigators, not just to my family, but to Prince Harry and his. As the formidable Mr Sherborne and my diligent solicitor, Ellen Gallagher, and our impressive team of lawyers at Hamlins have showed, in over 1,300 civil cases, these unlawful practices were not isolated incidents. They were industrial in scale and central to the modus operandi of News Group newspapers as a whole. I once said that the big beasts of the tabloid jungle have no predators. I was wrong. They have Prince Harry. His bravery and astonishing courage have brought accountability to a part of the media world that thought it was untouchable. I am sure I speak on behalf of the thousands of victims when I say we are grateful to him for his unwavering support and his determination under extraordinary pressure. If Rupert Murdoch had any decency, he should follow this corporate admission of guilt with a personal apology to Prince Harry, to his father our King, and to the countless others who suffered the same unlawful behaviour at the hands of his media empire. News Group newspapers owes so many such apologies. Thousands of ordinary people just trying to live their lives have endured the same unlawful behaviour. Many were victims of heinous crimes, including victims of terrorism, grieving families, and people caught in personal tragedies. I'll never get over some of the stories I've heard in this case. I owe some apologies too. This saga has placed an unforgivable strain on the people in my life. From my former wife Siobhan, mother to my beautiful children, to my wider family and friends, I am sorry that Rebecca Brooks, decided you were just collateral damage in their corporate war on the elected representatives who sought their accountability. This fight has made me reflect on what it means to settle. Legally, it's a technical term. Emotionally, it's much deeper. I wish I could bring justice for everyone Newsgroup newspapers has ruined and bullied, but I can't. Our system remains stacked against victims in favour of the powerful. So what does this case mean? Why is it so important? As the United Kingdom continues to witness tragic crimes and terrible atrocities, at least we know now that because of the work of my solicitor Ellen Gallagher and lawyers like her, victims and their loved ones are unlikely to have their phones hacked or their medical records stolen by tabloid newspapers, as routinely used to happen. At the heart of this case, and all the 1,300 others, is the important principle that no one is above the law. And in this sense, today's result represents a challenge to the criminal justice system. I finish with two questions. To Sir Mark Rowley, when you receive our dossier exposing wrongdoing, will the Metropolitan Police act? To the Prime Minister, I know you care deeply about fairness and the law, but are we really willing to continue as a country where some corporate executives are above the law and out of the reach of the police? Thank you.
It doesn't look like there's going to be questions
just on
and answers.
operational matters, if you want hard copies of the statement...
That was Lord Watson, one of the two remaining claimants, and before that, David Sherburn, the barrister on behalf of Prince Harry, reading out an extensive statement. In reverse order, Lord Watson was saying he was glad that the Sun newspaper has finally accepted responsibility for their actions, and he commended Prince Harry's bravery and astonishing coverage in bringing accountability to part of the media world that had felt untouchable. David Sherburn's statement on behalf of Prince Harry and Lord Watson described this settlement as a monumental victory and then highlighted that the Sun had admitted engaging in illegal practices, and they described it as a vindication for all of the claimants. The statement did go on further than that to, at one point, describe the Sun as a criminal enterprise in regards to things like perjury as it related to the broader investigation over the last decade. Plus, that part is explicitly denied by Newsgroup newspapers in their own statement, where they do say that they did not involve any admission of illegality in response to the 2006 arrests and subsequent actions that were implied there by the statement from David Sherburn. We've got with us Jenny Bond, royal commentator. We've also got Matthew Gill, a media lawyer, and our own Rhiannon Mills. Rhiannon, to you first of all, the statement there read by David Sherburn on behalf of Prince Harry and Lord Watson went a lot further, perhaps, than we were expecting.
Mm-hmm. If we wanted any clarification about how huge Prince Harry, Tom Watson and his legal team believe this settlement is, then we certainly got it in spades. In that statement that was read out, he described this as a monumental victory, that it was admitted that the Sun has engaged in illegal practices, and he described it as vindication for hundreds of other claimants. And you have to remember that there have been around 1,300 claimants who've settled with Newsgroup newspapers over the years but have never received any apology, and they've never received any admission of liability. You are right. In that statement, he certainly went further in terms of the accusations than I expected. With some kind of settlement, you may think that there would have been caveats in terms of of what the legal team could say with regard to what they think went on at News Group newspapers. Some of the numbers were staggering. He talked about how more than 100 private investigators had been employed over 16 years on 35,000 occasions. We know that for Prince Harry and Tom Watson, also a large part of this case wasn't just the stories that were written around them and the unlawful activities that were used to write those stories, but also what they've described as a corporate cover-up. David Sherborne there talking about the deleting of 30 million emails and backup tapes while a police investigation was going on into phone hacking. He specifically talked about Rebecca Brooks saying at the time that she'd run a clean ship. Instead, David Sherborne there saying this had exposed a criminal enterprise. Also, and this is really significant, they then go on to call for the rule of law to run its course. They're calling for the police and Parliament to now investigate, with David Sherborne saying that today the lies are laid bare, no one stands above the law, the time for accountability has arrived. I think it's also worth touching on Tom Watson speaking there, the very personal side of the impact of what it was to face stories being written about you when you didn't know what the sources were and where the information was coming from. He talked about the impact on his family, how his family ultimately were collateral damage in that battle between the papers and Parliament. So a very moving statement from him, but I think really important to point out that, yes, the settlement has been made, the apology has been issued, but you can hear from the legal team there, they still want this to go further. They want police to investigate, they want Parliament to investigate. They are not leaving it here today just simply with this apology.
Rhiannon, thank you for that. Let's bring in Matthew Gill, a media lawyer. Matthew, what's your take on that point that Lord Watson really focused on when he urged Sir Mark Rowley to open a police investigation? What we've just seen was a settlement made, not of course, a conviction in a civil case. Is it likely to trigger anything more than that?
I think it's really important to acknowledge that Prince Harry and Lord Tom Watson were bringing to this trial the allegation that there was a corporate cover-up and that the very senior executives in The Sun and the News of the World knew that this was going on and that they deleted millions of emails. And The Sun and the News of the World and News Group have made no admissions about that in this apology, and they continue to deny that there was any corporate cover-up. So this point, this argument that Prince Harry was seeking to make will now go untested in this civil trial. And that's why they're trying to urge the police to look into this, to take up the mantle and to look into these allegations of a corporate cover-up and of wrongdoing that went right to the top. They've now got the admission that The Sun was involved in some unlawful activities relating to Prince Harry and Lord Tom Watson in terms of blagging information and other unlawful means of obtaining information. There's no admission about phone hacking at The Sun. And now they will be facing a very difficult battle to get the police to get involved in this and to investigate these allegations that they chose not to push to trial in the civil courts.
Jenny Bond, last word to you in terms of final thoughts after that long statement, in particular from David Sherborne.
Well, I think it does show that Harry does regard this as his life's mission. And although this civil action is now over, he has passed the baton on, if you want, to the police and to Parliament with this demand, certainly a request, but more a demand that this should go further. I mean, I think one reason that NGN didn't particularly want to go through this court case because they didn't want a deep analysis of whether or not there'd been a cover-up, whether senior executives were involved, which they've always denied. But Harry clearly doesn't want to let that particular bone go. He believes there was a cover-up, and he has named names, Rebecca Brooks, for example. And he said, she was saying that she ran a very clean ship. But now she is admitting that, no, it was anything but that. So he's gunning for her, it seems. But I think he's going to leave it to others and take a step back, personally. I think it's quite also interesting to reflect on. I wonder what the King is thinking about all of this. He did not want his son to pursue this case. Harry has said that. It's quite a bone of contention between them. But the king himself, I'm sure, has been subjected to equal surveillance, shall we say, by tabloid press over the many years. And I would have thought quietly in a corner he might be thinking, well done, son, you did good.
Jenny, thanks so much for your take. Thank you also to Matthew Gill and, of course, to our Rhiannon Mills. There'll be more on this story at the top of the hour, but we're now going to hand over to Darren McCaffrey for Business Live.